Hello, you idealists out there. Welcome, family. We're back again to talk more about the price we pay. But as a little recap from our last episode, we talked about money, how it comes into existence through loans, and that every dollar you see is based on debt. It's somebody's debt somewhere. So the minute you start talking about interest, well, the interest isn't in the money supply. So when we pay back interest, we're taking money out of the supply that someone needs to pay back their debt. And it guarantees that someone, somewhere, is going to go bankrupt. Just like a horrible game of musical chairs, where there's only 4 chairs, but there's 5 people. Somebody isn't getting a chair. The other thing we talked about is that money is made scarce, right? From the minute it's created, it's scarce already, right? It's a commodity that's hard to come by. It ensures that people go out and get loans. The bank has plenty of people lining up because that's how they earn their money, right? That's how they make their wealth. We talked about how foreclosure is built into the system. But we didn't talk about just the act of saving. I get a paycheck. That paycheck is coming out of the money supply through somebody's loan. And I go and let's say I'm a good saver. I'm saving that money. Well, the money that I'm saving is helping people up. Somebody I don't know go into debt and bankruptcy or being foreclosed on their house or this or that. Yes. So we are co-creating each other's misery without even being aware that we're doing that. That is very insidious. We talked about how the Fed tries to control inflation because with so many people needing loans, so many dollars going into the money supply, that causes inflation because each dollar that goes in makes the one before it worth less than it was. So the more loans that come into the system, the less and less each existing dollar is worth. So how the Fed controls that is by raising interest so less and less people can get a loan, thus tightening the money supply. The supply becomes less and less. But the United States government is constantly expanding that supply by offering aid to other countries. These big projects, when they start talking about the budget, where are they getting that money? It's not from your taxes. It's not from the taxes that they're collecting. It's from money that they're requesting from the Fed. So, I read one of the things the IMF put out and kept to itself was an article called Starving the Beast. Starve the Beast. And it was about, as I read through it, they're talking about the United States. They're talking about cutting off credit to the United States. And that's what first put me on the alert. And this was years ago in the 90s, the late 90s. Starving the Beast. And I got an early copy of that. I downloaded it directly from the IMF. And I read through it. And I was shocked. Shocked that they were planning on doing this. And they were trying to figure out what the repercussions would be worldwide. Because the United States is the reserve currency. And that was also discussed in the last episode. So if you want to know more about the reserve currency and the fact that the whole world is looking to move away from the reserve currency, go check out the last episode. This episode, we want to talk about the different things that affect price. Yes, putting more money out into the money supply causes inflation. But what else can cause inflation? Well, scarcity. Anything that causes something to become scarce will cause the price to rise. In fact, our system requires scarcity. It's built into the system. The only way that you can make profit is if you keep a product scarce. You gotta keep it scarce. If it's abundant, why? You can't charge a whole lot of money for it. One of the things that I heard a while ago is Jacques Fresco. If you don't know who Jacques Fresco is, go look him up. He started something called the Venus Project. And back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was a regular attendee of meetings that were going on with the Venus Project. So I was a little bit behind the scenes on that. But Jacques Fresco has this wonderful talk that he gives about scarcity and abundance. And one of the things he wanted to change was he wanted to flip like me, he wants to flip everything on its head and create abundance, not scarcity. Let's take a look at what he said.
However, let's say it rained gold for one day. People would empty all their drawers, fill it with gold, the attic and everything. But if it kept raining gold for months, they'd sweep it out, throw their rings away. Scarcity. They save the gold because it has a value, but it only has a value as long as it's scarce.
There's an old Native American proverb that said that the very last tree, the very last rhinoceros, we would place so much value on it that we couldn't wait to kill it, to destroy it. And when I thought about that proverb, the very last rhinoceros, because it is scarce, it's the last one, it would be worth maybe billions of dollars. And some poor desperate soul who has no money would look at it and see dollar signs. They would say, if I could just kill that one rhinoceros, that last rhinoceros, I could feed my family for the rest of their lives. He would see it as an opportunity. And he would kill it not because he's greedy, but because he's desperate. The last chance to make it big in this world. And that's part of the mechanisms that we're living under. Because the monetary system, in order for you to earn a profit, what you offer has to be scarce. And it invites scarcity. In order for you to make a profit, it can't be abundant. And so, like we talked about in the first episode, we want to put everything on its head, right? Flip it all over. So instead of scarcity, what we're going to try to create is a system of abundance. But we always have to be aware that we have limited resources. And so creating abundance from the limited resources is key. The next thing I want to talk about is energy. Okay? Right now we're using energies that are not renewable. Things like oil, gas, coal. These are all non-renewable sources. And the funny part about it is we have, through our science and our technology, we are aware of a lot of different things that would create abundance in energy. I mean, Tesla himself, he was talking about energy for everybody, free energy, just being transmitted through the air. Hey! And immediately when he died, the poorest man, because they rejected, they needed to have a way to make profits off of it. And the reason why they needed that is because, hey, we're getting these loans, we gotta keep ahead of that. And here we are, we're running as fast as we can to keep ahead of the debt. We're running full tilt. We're in survival mode. We gotta keep ahead of the debt. We don't want to be that guy in the musical chairs that doesn't get a seat at the table. He's left out and bankrupt. We don't want to be that guy. So, just like with everything else, we want to use means or technologies that create abundance. And a lot of these things are being hidden away because, hey, we don't want to talk about that if we still have this monetary system. And that's why the monetary system has to be replaced with something else. And we're going to talk about that solution in this video. We're going to talk a little bit about it, but coming up, we're going to really lay it out. Some concrete steps. But we have to keep energy in mind because that's one of the key things that has to be there. Abundance and energy. Another thing that's creating scarcity is climate change. Hey, with all these floods coming through, the flooding and the droughts, yeah, killing off a lot of crops. So expect your food to cost more. It's got to. It's got to. No matter how much money you have, if the actual resource isn't there, then somebody's going to go hungry. I don't care how much money you have. Now, having money in this particular system kind of guarantees that you get there first. Hey, I'll give you $100,000 for that apple. Okay, give it to me. Give it to me. Here's the apple. And the guy that has nothing, well, he's kind of out of luck. So we need to have methodologies of combating climate change. And one of the things that NASA did, see, everybody thinks we waste money on NASA. We don't. From Velcro to Tang to just lenses. They are fantastic. Do not touch NASA. That is a government agency that works. Okay? However, because the government says, hey, we're not really a corporation, they sold those ideas and patents over to corporations, which then use those to manufacture in mass, right? Mass produce and distribute to us. But the idea, the practical idea, was created by the scientific community. They didn't make millions and billions off of it. Some of them that created this just had a regular old salary, like the rest of us. But the thing that NASA came up with was aeroponics, right? They were looking for a way to grow crops without bringing a lot of soil, because soil's heavy. And when the minute you start talking about bringing a lot of soil, well, or even a lot of water, you're talking about weighting things down. And water is sloshy. And if you've looked at any of those videos from NASA about why water is not good to transport in a rocket, when it's going up in the air, the water tends to want to slosh backward and forward, and that can take off the equilibrium, and the next thing you know, the rocket is tumbling. So they like solid things going up with the rocket, and if water is there, it's made into a solid or something so that it can go up and not slosh around and move around and cause instability in the rocket. But having gone through all of that, they came up with, if they could just take a little bit of water with them, right? Not so much that it'll cause imbalance, and then recycle that water through and through and through and through and use it to grow plants, then that would be the best thing. And so they came up with aeroponics, where they miss the roots. And they found that they could grow crops year-round, and 6 cycles of crops instead of 2 in a year cycle. That's a good way to create abundance, if you ask me. The other thing that we need to think about is the 6th extinction event. You talk about things being scarce, extinction will do that. It'll make it scarce. We don't want that last rhinoceros to get killed because someone's desperate to feed their family. And they see it as an opportunity to make millions or billions of dollars in one stroke by getting rid of that last thing. So there's a lot of mechanisms that cause scarcity. We have to be aware of that. But there are also an infinite number of ideas and technologies that haven't even been thought of yet because we haven't been trying to think of it. We've been trying to fit inside of this box, this current box that we're living in, and work under those rules. Because it's like playing basketball. When you're out on the basketball court playing the basketball game, you're not thinking of the rules of baseball or some other, or trying to invent a new game. You're just trying to play the game that you're in. And so we're trying to create a brand new game. This is our challenge. Now, let's talk about our current state again. We are all in survival mode. We're one disaster away, one paycheck away from not making it. We don't know what it's like to not live under that kind of stress. You would think if we actually have abundance, if this current state of things is abundance, why am I so stressed out? Like I said, you could be making good money and still be stressed out. One paycheck away from disaster. The majority of people in the United States. How did that happen? Well, we went over how it happened. How do we get out of it? That's the question. One other thing, I used to live in Texas. Loved the Brownstone Report. That was a great show. Learned a lot about farming and what the farmers were going through. Things up here in the north you don't hear about. Subsidies, this and that. And why so many farmers were losing their farms after taking those subsidies. Just a fascinating show. I don't know if they still have it because I now live in the north. I don't live in Texas anymore. And, bravo, Mr. Brownstone. Bravo. Anyway. When I came back from Texas, I came back up north. It was right after the fall of the economy in 2008. I think I came back in 2010. Things were still horrible up here, and I couldn't find a job in my field. And so one of the first jobs I took was a representative for Aflac. And even though I didn't make any money, I wound up spending more money with gas, driving around trying to sell Aflac than I actually earned. I'm glad that I actually did that because I learned a lot about our healthcare system. What I learned is 100% of us are going to get sick. At some point, you're going to get too sick to work. And when that happens, if you were working, you're going to lose your insurance. Yes, you are. And the cost of taking care of you after you get sick, critically ill, falls all on your shoulders. Yes, it does. Now, that's going to happen to 100% of everyone, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, no matter what happens. And while you're working, you think you're covered. I'm working. I'm putting some of my money into, a medical plan. But let's say you get in a car accident. Well, right away, you're not working anymore. That means you've lost your insurance, which means you are now paying for 100% out of your pocket. Scam. What? All those years I've been putting in there and now I can't get any of that money back because I'm not paying premiums anymore. My job isn't paying premiums anymore. My job will give me a COBRA form, and if I want to take money out of my non-existent income, out of my savings, yeah, hopefully I have a savings and pay into having medical. I can do that until I have nothing left. Horrible system. Horrible, horrible, horrible. And one day, 100% of us are going to be too sick to work. That day may happen when you're 79, 80. That day may happen tomorrow because of something that happens. And at that moment, you're screwed. So I learned about that. And I learned about it also, it came up again with my parents, who are both passed away now. When I came back up from Texas a few years later, I learned that my mom had a stroke. She couldn't speak. And then she started to get dementia. And my brother begged me, please, please, take care of Mom. So I went down to Texas and I brought her back up. I didn't know that she had dementia. I knew that she had the stroke and she couldn't speak. I didn't know she had dementia. She didn't know me. She didn't know me. To her, I was a stranger. And I was working at Ford Motor Company at the time, and I asked my bosses if I could work from home and take care of my mom. And they said okay. They knew that I love my mom. But she was not the same person. She didn't know who I was. She couldn't talk. And she was constantly trying to escape because to her, I was some type of stranger, keeping her locked into my house. And every time I tried to go wash her in the morning, it was a struggle because she thought I was trying to do her harm. And I had put child locks all over the house. I'm telling you a very personal story here. I put child locks all over the house, trying to keep her in with me, trying to watch her while I'm trying to work, while I'm in meetings with my fellow workmates. And then one day she got out of the house. She found a way to open the door and she walked out. Thank God she walked out into the yard, which was closed in and locked. It had a lock on the gate that she couldn't open. And it was getting cold outside. And thank goodness she had a coat on. But underneath the coat, she only had pajamas. Very thin pajamas at that. And I kept trying to convince her to come in the house, and she was fighting me, and it was a horrible, horrible thing. And I knew at that moment she could never, ever again take care of herself. Even if she were the wealthiest person on the planet, she would not be paying bills to anybody. She would not be taking care of herself. There are so many older people that, because no one checks on them, they just pass away and nobody knows. Or they're sitting in their house starving with no food because they don't remember how to go to the store. And that's a horrible thing. Something similar happened to my dad, as he was always the person to take care of other people. If your water heater went out, he was the person that said, hey, let me come over and help you switch that out. Or you just got a new place, daughter? Let me come over and check your wiring. And he wired up my my stove so I could put that in. He ran because he wanted to make sure that it could hold the current that it would require, because I got an electric stove. And he did all of that. But then as he got older, he was in his 80s, and the dementia started popping in. And he stopped paying his bills. Nobody knew that he had stopped paying his bills, because when you went over and talked to him, he seemed fine. And I found out kind of by accident. I went over to visit, and it was cold. And he was trying to start a gas fireplace that he had in his living room, and it wouldn't start. And then I'm like, well, why is it cold in here, Papa? It's don't you have the furnace on? He's like, well, no, that's not working either. I'm like, what do you mean it's not working? I went down and checked it, and I'm like, oh, you don't have any gas flow. So then I called all my family, and I'm telling them, hey, they don't have any gas on. They got shut off. And so we scraped money together and we paid the bill. But he had stopped paying the bill because he didn't remember. And my dad had plenty of money in the bank to pay bills. And that really made me think. At some point, whether it's through physical illness or mental illness, 100% of us are going to need help. And this system that we currently live under does not provide that. That has to change. When the mind goes, so does the organization. So does everything go. There are parents who have autistic children. And they fear for the future of their children because their children can't take care of themselves. So what happens when they pass on? That has to change. We cannot be in survival mode 100% of the time, from womb to the tomb. Because currently, by my assessments, that's what's happening. We're trying to outdo debt. We're trying to keep our head above water, and we're running on this wheel. What are those things, the hamster wheel? We're running on it. But eventually we can't run anymore. And some of us are going to get steamrolled. That is unacceptable to me. I don't know about, but to you, to me, unacceptable. And I have very personal experiences with that. Unacceptable. Fear of survival. Now, let's talk about the solution. Right now, our money system is based on debt and scarcity. I want to flip that on its head. We talked about it in the first episode. I wear this around my neck all the time. The Star of David and what it means. You have energy that's going in, our society is pyramidal shape, whether it was a king sitting at the top, the president, bankers, it doesn't matter. It's always been pyramidal. And the Star of David says, hey, you have to have some force taking it down the other way. Taking energy back from the top and bringing it back down to the bottom. And that is how you create stability and equity. Geometrically speaking. So how do we apply that principle to the money system? Well, instead of creating debt and scarcity, we're creating abundance, and everything is based on production, right? It's based on, not on debt, but on bringing value into the system. What brings value? Well, people being educated brings value into the system, right? Someone producing something brings value into the system. Intellectual property brings value into the system. Growing a tree, growing food, brings value into the system. So things that bring value there is a grant that is bestowed on anyone who is bringing value into the system or trying to bring it. And it is paid up front. So we talked about last time when a company tries to, create a product for a long time, they don't have any income. While you're doing research and development, while you're doing prototyping, when you do your first manufacture of something, All of that is money that has to be outlaid. You're not selling the product yet because you have no product. But once you have the product, now you can sell it. But up until then, how are you subsisting? Well, you're subsisting on loans. And you're going into debt. So to change that around, you are given a grant. And the grant covers everything that you need, including your living. So that you can do all of these things. But I'm going to take it a step further. And then when I start talking about the bottom-up governance, a resource-based value system, then you'll see that you'll need to put in a request for that. Or there needs to be someone that has a need for whatever service you're going to give. So let's say that I need a road repaired. So then whatever governing body that creates the money there's an RFP put out for fixing a road. And an estimate must be submitted. What do you need? I need tar, I need people, I need this, I need that. And that estimate is submitted. And then the grant is created. Not a loan, but a grant. So it doesn't need to be paid back. Now, the grant is tied to actual resources that exist somewhere. And so all of the money isn't given directly over to the participating entity that's going to do the fix. Some of it is whatever resources are allocated, it's put into those resources. So those resources are sitting there and they're paid for up front. You need tar, you need asphalt, you need blah, 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 concrete, blah, 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 rebar. All of those different items are sitting there. They're listed out and they're done. Whatever it is, that's been distributed already because it's being consumed out and it has to be remanufactured. And so this request also created new requests for production. What is being taken out has to be produced again. And so those are grants going out to these guys to produce more. And it's value-based, right? Now, they don't get the full funding that they requested. They get the actual resources that are needed. And it goes all the way up to the resource producer. Everything is based on production. Consuming, you get the resource you get the resource, right? You're consuming it. You're taking it out. So the two should become equivalent. They cancel each other out. Now, if you're a faker and you're not really going to do the work, that'll be known too. Because the people who created the request, they'll say, hey, no one has fixed the road. Well, the resources are there, da-da-da-da. The human resources haven't been deployed and they haven't deployed da-da-da. So then they can go back to here and say, hey, these are waiting for you to be picked up and used on this project. It's been allocated to this. So let's say that they took it and they used it for something else. Something where maybe they outside of the system, they want to use it to get money in. Well, now they're blocked from using the system. They're blocked. And you have to find another another entity that is willing to do the job. So one of the things about the system is the bottom-up governance is that as a citizen, you know what you need. And you see things around you that need to be done. Maybe someone sees a show and they see that there's garbage floating around out in the middle of the ocean. And someone has to clean it up. And so they put in a request that that happens. That we are going to be responsible for cleaning up this garbage continent. Taking that out of the water so that the waters can produce fish. And since that is a value add for the planet and for humanity, there's a grant issued. And it's done. Let's say I want to start my own business. And I don't have any resources to do it. Well, planning and everything can be done through learning institutions. This is where most of our research and development is happening anyway. What people don't realize is that, you have people who are TAs and researcher assistants, and they're doing all of this, scientific study. And they're understanding these different principles, and they're making breakthroughs and learning different things. And what generally happens is a corporation who has money will come in, buy the idea from the school. The people who actually came up with the intellectual property maybe get a little bit of compensation. Here's a few. And then the company goes and they run off with it and they make a gazillion dollars off of it. That's completely wrong. If you come up with an idea that is useful to society, you should get the residuals from it. So you're doing the research and development, you create a new process, or you discover a new property, some chemical property. Then comes the practical application of it. How can it be applied? And you have given society something of value. And different entities should be able to come and use that new discovery to try to find a practical way to implement it into something. Not one entity comes and buys it up and then nobody else can see it. No. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, something very similar happened in programming. A long time ago, when computers were new and very few people knew how to program, there was a group of individuals who were the elite. They were the only ones in the country who knew how to program or what to do. They were putting their minds together, and they would share their ideas. Even though they were from different companies or from different learning institutions, they would share their ideas. Because who's going to help you to solve this issue? Well, only one of the elite could do that, who would even know what you were talking about. And so they would openly share ideas. Oh, we're going to do something called email. It didn't exist before. So they shared their ideas. And what one person wouldn't know on their own, by putting their heads together, they quickly resolved how it could be done. And they created a shared platform that they could each build off of. Now, among those that were sitting quietly in the wings are people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and Wozniak and There were a bunch of people in those early groups. And at some point, Bill Gates said to himself, I'm going to patent what they're sharing openly. I'm going to patent it. He didn't necessarily make those things. He kind of saw these different things floating by, and he was storing up stuff and putting things together to make Windows. And once he got Windows with all of the stuff that people were sharing openly with each other, he patented it. And then he told them that they couldn't use it because it's now a part of Windows, and he had a patent on it. And it destroyed that community. They felt that they couldn't trust anybody with their intellectual property, with talking with anyone. Remember, they're the only, who do you go to? These are the only guys you could talk to. And he single-handedly destroyed that. Well, there was a guy called Richard Stallman, and you can look all this up. It's on the internet. And Richard Stallman wanted to restore that community. So he created what was called the GNU license. GNU. And in order for people to share their ideas and get help, they had to sign that agreement that whatever was shared amongst them could not be patented by anyone. And if you used any piece of code from anyone in the group, you had to give them credit for it. And thus started the open source community. Now, what happened was, because they all were sharing stuff, a lot of stuff became free of charge. You could download examples and test it and do this and that. It helped with that. And one of the things that happened is that these things were, because they were inexpensive or free, there were a lot more people who knew how to use it. One of the reasons why the majority of the internet is built on Apache and Tomcat is because these are products that came out of that open source community. And a lot of people could join in to the internet for very little money. They didn't have to make huge investments to start, donating content to the internet. And so the internet grew at a very fast pace. Now imagine if Microsoft was in control of all of that and you had to have at least $5,000 for your server to get the software for your server. And each machine that you put it on, you had to have $5,000 more. Well, it would only be the very rich who could even start a website. And that would have been the death of the internet. So Richard Stallman, and you won't hear his name unless you're a nerd like me. It was because of that you have the internet. It is because of that you have sites like YouTube, right? Where you could upload content for free. You're not paying for storage. They're letting you use that site for free. That's why you have that. So before you say, oh, they're not capitalist, blah, 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 blah. There are a lot of things that are social in nature, like libraries. That is not a capitalistic structure. That is something that is social in structure. Firemen, being able to have your fires put out. You're not directly paying that out of your pocket. That is a social structure. So we have to get away from, you're just a socialist. You're this or you're that. You got to get away from those labels. They're keeping you from thinking how best to structure things. Now, we want a value-based system. And the reason why we want that is so that we can put value on people. We can put value on animals. We can put value on trees, for Christ's sakes. These are the things that produce oxygen so that we can survive on this planet. This is the only planet we can live on right now. And for all that talk of going to Mars and this and that, you should know that Mars has a less dense gravity than, and you will start to unravel the very structure of you will unravel in less gravity. That means you'll lose data, the data that makes up you. We're not ready for that. And there's nothing right now that we can, there are no alternatives. We have to take care of Spaceship Earth, as Buckminster Fuller called it, Spaceship Earth. We have to take care of what we have now. And that means cleaning up the crap that's floating around out in the oceans and looking at it for what it is. It's a value. Not, can I make a profit off of doing that? That's not what it's about. It is about conservation and doing what's right for civilization. We have to start thinking differently. Anyway, I'm going to get more into the mechanisms and how this is structured in the next episode. Rebuilding our civilization with real concrete ideas. Until then, please like and subscribe. Give me a comment. Give me some feedback. Do you agree? Not agree? Hey, we're in this together. We're on Spaceship Earth together. And we are looking at all kinds of things happening. Floods in China. Hey, there are people that are going to suffer because the rice paddies were washed away. What are they going to eat? What are we going to eat with droughts and floods over here? We have to start thinking about this as humans and with our humanity, not with our greed and the lowest part of our nature leading the way, but with our highest part. How do we structure this so that we're not in survival mode every second of every day? Anyway, like and subscribe, tell your friends, let's spread the message, and let's do this thing. Utopian Idealist out.